My name is Donetta Ellison, 34 years old. The sound hit me before the sight did. My son's muffled cries bouncing down the hallway, sharp enough to slice through the hum of the summer heat. I dropped the laundry basket, socks spilling across the floor like fallen petals. The house had that sticky, airless quiet that made every noise feel alive. My sister Claire had been watching him for 15 minutes, doing me a favor, or so she liked to remind me. When I reached the doorway, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. My 8-year-old boy, pale and trembling, hung upside down by his ankles. A leather belt looped around his legs, hooked over the closet bar. His shirt had fallen toward his face, exposing his small stomach, ribs rising and falling too fast. His arms flailed weakly, trying to grab at the air. And Claire, she was standing there laughing, her phone pointed at him. "Relax," she said between giggles. "It's just a game. Maybe gravity will teach him discipline. You baby him too much." My throat burned as I shouted, "What the hell are you doing?" My voice cracked, the words scraping against the walls. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Donetta. You act like I'm hurting him. I'm teaching him. Speed comes from fear." That phrase hit me like a ghost. Speed comes from fear. The words had teeth. I hadn't heard them since I was a child, the same phrase my mother used when I hesitated to answer, when my hand was too slow, cleaning up the kitchen. She'd say it right before slapping the counter. My hand shook so badly I could barely unbuckle the belt. My son whimpered as I lowered him to the ground, his small body collapsing into my arms. His breath came out in sobs he tried to swallow, the way I used to. "Look at you," Claire muttered, still dramatic. "Mom says you're too soft. Maybe he'll learn faster if you stop coddling him." "Get out," I hissed. Before I could say another word, the screen door creaked open. My parents stepped in from the porch. My father's face was unreadable, my mother's calm, too calm. "What's all the noise?" Dad asked, like we'd disturbed his nap. I pointed at Claire. She hung my son upside down with a belt. Mom's eyebrow twitched. "He's fine, Donetta. You're always exaggerating. He could have gotten hurt." Dad chuckled, leaning against the doorway. "Maybe now he'll move faster. You baby that boy too much." Mom's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "You know how we raised you, dear. Speed comes from fear. Worked, didn't it?" The room tilted. My skin crawled. "You think that worked?" Claire smirked. "Well, it made me strong. Maybe you should try it sometime." I gathered my son in my arms and walked out without another word. Their laughter followed me down the hallway, sharp, deliberate, echoing like a ritual chant. That night, dinner felt like sitting at a stranger's table. My parents laughed with Claire about her promotion, about her confidence. Every word was a needle disguised as praise. "You should learn from your sister," Dad said, stabbing his fork into his food. "She doesn't make excuses." Mom added, "Maybe if you stopped acting like a victim, your son wouldn't cry every time someone raises their voice." Claire snorted. "He's slow, just like his mom." My son sat beside me, pushing peas around his plate, his eyes red-rimmed and empty. I whispered, "Eat something." He shook his head. Claire leaned closer. "Maybe I should hang him again tomorrow, see if he moves faster next time." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. No one blinked. Mom sighed. "See, you can't take a joke." That was their favorite excuse. Every cruelty was a joke. Every humiliation was character building. Later that night, I found my son curled up on his bed, clutching his stuffed fox. "Grandma said if I don't move faster, I'll end up useless," he whispered. My heart cracked quietly. I brushed his hair back. "You did nothing wrong. You're perfect." He blinked. "Then why does Grandma say you're broken?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. From the hallway came their voices again, low and smooth. "She's overreacting," Mom said. "Always does." Dad chuckled. "We were too lenient on her. Claire's the strong one." Claire's laughter followed, soft and satisfied. "Don't worry. She'll calm down when she remembers she has nowhere else to go." They were right. I was still living under their roof. After my divorce, I'd run out of places to go. Every dollar I made went to bills, to survival. I'd thought moving back here would be temporary, a way to save money and rebuild. Instead, it became a slow suffocation. That night, I stared at the ceiling while my son slept beside me, tracing the cracks in the plaster like escape routes. The air smelled like old paint and the faint sweetness of the detergent Mom used. Lavender, the same as when I was a kid. I used to think that smell meant safety. Now it just made me nauseous. When morning came, I made breakfast like nothing had happened. Habit, eggs, toast, milk. My hands moved on autopilot. My son sat at the table, quiet. Mom entered, yawning. "Don't feed him before chores," she said. "He didn't earn it." "He's 8, I said softly. She smirked. "You were scrubbing floors by 8. Maybe that's why you turned out ungrateful." Claire came down, her perfume choking the air. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle her. She just needs a reminder who's in charge." I turned to my son. "Come on," I said, "we'll eat outside." The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of wet grass. My son looked up at me, eyes still swollen. "Are we leaving?" "Not yet," I said, "but soon." He didn't ask when, he just nodded. That was the moment I realized he'd learned silence from me. Inside, I heard them laughing again. My father's booming voice, Mom's sharp giggle, Claire's phone camera clicking as she probably took another selfie at the kitchen table. Their laughter used to make me shrink. Now it made me focus. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was done being the family's entertainment. That night, I sat in the dark beside my son's bed, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing. My hand rested on his small back. I whispered, "It's going to end soon." He stirred. "Will it be okay?" I hesitated, then said, "Better than okay." Outside, the wind rattled the window screen. Downstairs, someone laughed at a television show. It all sounded like another life. I looked toward the door, the same door I'd once stood behind as a child, terrified to open it. This time, I didn't feel fear. I felt something else. A calm so deep it was almost dangerous. I wasn't just leaving. I was going to teach them what fear really felt like. By morning, the house had reset itself to its usual performance, as if last night were a deleted scene no one would mention. The toaster burned another slice. Dad barked through the open window at a gardener about edges. Claire scrolled with her chin tilted high, like the air was a camera. I poured cereal for my son and held the spoon longer than necessary, not because I was thinking, but because I was done thinking and had already chosen. Mom walked in and didn't look at me. "If she's staying under this roof," she said to no one, "she follows our rules. The boy does chores before food." I slid the bowl toward my son anyway and watched his shoulders lower by a fraction, the smallest exhale. I told myself to remember that tiny drop in his shoulders when I started doubting myself later. They wanted noise from me, yelling, pleading, proof that I was still their mirror. Instead, I gave them choreography. Wash the pan, dry the pan, put it away, sign the school form, tuck it into the backpack, lace the shoes, kiss the forehead. Claire smirked across the table. "Discipline is love," she said, picking at a cuticle. "I could show you again." I said nothing. Silence is an instrument. You just have to practice long enough to play it without shaking. When my son left for school, I walked the long hall to the garage and opened the old filing cabinet where Dad kept warranties, tax receipts, and a stack of glossy family Christmas letters he'd written like campaign flyers. I slid out my documents: birth certificate, social security card, my son's immunizations, the divorce decree I never read past the judge's stamped name. I'd hidden duplicates already, but I wanted originals. I folded them once, twice, and slid them into the lining of my tote where I'd unstitched a seam the night before and re-sewn it by hand, the thread nearly invisible. The act steadied me. Every stitch said, "You're not staying." At lunch, I called my manager from the parking lot behind the pharmacy, where the cell reception was decent. The sun baked the roof of the car and sweat gathered at the back of my neck. "I can take any extra shifts," I said, "even overnight, especially overnight." She hesitated, then sighed, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. "We've got inventory Saturday, 2 closings next week, and a Sunday morning truck. It's yours if you want it." "I want it." The word came out like a hand closing around a rope. The next call was less honest. I looked up the company Claire had name-dropped for months, the one she said had headhunted her because winners don't apply. Winners get invited. She'd left a copy of her resume open on the family computer for Mom to admire. Details inflated like parade balloons. A certification she hadn't earned, a title she never held, a college honor she'd watched other people receive. I didn't lie when I dialed the number on their careers page. I didn't have to. I only forwarded a polite email to a real HR address with a PDF of the resume she'd left lying around, and a short note. "Verifying credentials as a family reference? Thanks." I added a smiley face, the kind Claire uses when she's about to be cruel. Then the landlord. The little guest house out back had belonged to a neighbor's nephew once. When he left, Claire started managing it for extra cash. She bragged about passive income, while forgetting a lease requires names and signatures. I still had the text she'd sent me asking if I knew anyone who would pay cash and not ask questions. The landlord's number was printed on the side of his work truck, Rob's Roofing. I called and kept my voice warm. Just confirming the tenant in your rear unit. Claire's been subletting without paperwork. Might be a liability thing for you. Sorry to be the bearer. He went quiet in a way men do when they feel something slip. Yeah, he said at last. Thanks for the heads up. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the black phone screen. Not proud, not ashamed, just present. At home, I cleaned like any other day. Wiped counters, shook out rugs, folded towels. The muscle memory soothed me. Mom watched from a stool, performing indifference. You know, she said, I prayed last night that you'd come to your senses. God answers a mother's prayer. I tucked a towel edge into a neat square. Maybe he answered mine. She laughed. You don't pray, darling. You complain. There's a difference. I set the towel down like a final period. When my son came home, he studied my face the way children read weather. Are we leaving today? He whispered. No, I said, but we are practicing leaving. He nodded like he understood rehearsal. We packed a game into his backpack that he never played, 2 shirts into mine that no one would notice missing, our documents into the lining. We practiced secrets like scales. Who do we tell? No one. What do we do first? Shoes. What if Grandma asks questions? We shrug and say, I don't know. We turned it into a game until it wasn't scary anymore. At dinner, Dad was cheerful, the way people get when their control feels secure. Your sister's got a big meeting tomorrow, he announced, as if he were her press secretary. Real companies see real talent. Claire lifted her glass. Some of us don't need to cling to leftovers. Mom cut chicken with the calm of a surgeon. Donetta, you should take notes. I looked at the knife, then at my son's small hand resting against my thigh. I'm good, I said. I don't need notes. I know exactly what I'm doing. Mom's eyes flicked up. What does that mean? Nothing, I said, and smiled, just thinking how fast things change. The smile felt like a switchblade closing. That night, the wind ran its fingers through the trees, and the porch swing creaked. I packed by lamplight in the quiet way you learn when you've been trained to be invisible. Socks rolled, shirts flat, important things small. My son lay on his side, watching me through the rail of his bed like I was a movie he didn't want to miss. Will Grandma be mad? He asked. She'll be confused, I said. Then she'll be loud. He considered that. Like thunder? Like thunder, I said, but thunder is just noise. Down the hall, the TV laughter rose and fell. Dad coughed. The ice maker knocked. I tucked cash into my shoe and pictured the map to a different life. Bus route, secondhand store with plates for cheap, the apartment complex with the flickering sign, the laundromat that takes quarters and patience, the clinic where the receptionist knows my name and says it without pity. The map didn't frighten me. It felt like remembering a song. At midnight, I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth, watching my face in the mirror like a stranger's. The fluorescent light showed all the truths I'd avoided, the thin line between my eyebrows where years of not answering had etched themselves, the softness around my mouth that I'd mistaken for weakness, but was really a muscle, mercy, that I'd worked to exhaustion. Beneath that, something new. Not hardness, alignment, like bones set properly after a long time broken. Claire's footsteps paused outside the door. You're quiet, she said to the wood. Plotting? I spit, rinsed, wiped my mouth with a towel. Resting, I said through the door. Plotting is your thing. She laughed, small and mean. You won't do anything. You never do. I didn't answer. Her slippers whispered away. Morning arrived, dressed as normalcy again. Toast, perfume, Dad's complaints about the HOA, Mom's running list of my deficits. I tied my son's shoes and tucked the laces under double knots. He looked up. I touched my lips to his hair and breathed him in. Warm cereal. Sleep, boy. Today, I whispered. He nodded once, solemn and brave in the way kids are when they've been forced to rehearse bravery. The calls I'd made began rippling before lunch. Claire's phone lit up with an email and then another. Her smirk faltered as she read, then reassembled itself quickly, a performer mid-show. "It's fine," she said too loudly to no one. "They always verify. It's standard." Mom looked at me like my face had spoken. I continued scraping crumbs into my palm. By afternoon, Rob's roofing truck idled by the curb. He walked to the back unit with a clipboard, jaw set. Claire color drained faster than a staged faint. "This is harassment," she told him before he even spoke. He raised an eyebrow. "It's a lease violation," he said. "You know that." I stood at the sink and washed a single glass for a long time while Mom's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, a fish on carpet. Dad lumbered toward the door like a bouncer late to a bar fight. Noise, noise, noise. Thunder. I dried my hands and checked the clock. The minute hand clicked into agreement. I texted my manager. "Can start inventory tonight if needed." The bubbles appeared. "Please." I slipped my phone into my pocket and exhaled through my nose, slow as a diver rising. Dinner was smaller that night, somehow. Less food, less appetite, less pretending. Claire's laugh arrived late and left early. Mom tapped the side of her water glass like a judge about to read a verdict. "We are a family," she said. "We keep issues inside." Dad nodded as if he were the wall that kept inside intact. I stacked my plate quietly, then set down my fork. "I'm not an issue," I said, "and I'm not inside." My son's hand found the hem of my shirt. The room tilted again, but not in the dizzy way, more like a ship turning toward a truer line. Mom leaned forward. "Where exactly do you think you'll go?" She meant, "You have no money, no power, no witness." I met her eyes and, for the first time, didn't look away. "You'll see," I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't rise or waver. It just arrived and stayed. I stood, took my son's hand, and walked away from the table without asking to be excused. Behind us came the clatter of Dad's fork, the hiss of Mom's breath, Claire's tiny strangled "oh." The porch swing creaked like applause. In our room, I zipped the bags I'd packed, not caring if the sound carried. My son watched with his fox clutched to his chest. "Is it now?" he asked. "Soon," I said. "Soon is now's older sister." He smiled the first real smile I'd seen in weeks. It looked like dawn. Back in the hallway, I passed the family photos. Claire in caps and gowns that represented every celebration I'd been asked to photograph, but not join. Me holding birthday cakes that weren't for me. Mom and Dad in coordinated sweaters labeled "blessed" by a font that tried too hard. I paused at one of me at 9, chin tipped down, eyes tipped up, a hand on my shoulder that wasn't gentle. I pressed my finger to the glass and whispered to the girl inside, "I'm coming back for you too." On my way to the door, Mom stepped into the frame. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "No theatrics, just a statement of faith." "Maybe," I said, "but I regret staying more." She blinked, as if the equation had never occurred to her. The front door's lock turned as easily as it had the day we moved back in. The hinge sighed. The air outside was cool and unperfumed. The sky held its breath. I didn't leave then. Not yet. I closed the door again and returned to my son, sat on the edge of his bed, and rested my hand on his back the way I had the night before. We were past the noise now. All that remained was timing, and I trusted mine. "It's going to end soon," I whispered. He nodded into his pillow, already halfway to sleep. Down the hall, laughter rose again, brittle and thin. I stared at the ceiling and smiled without showing my teeth. Tomorrow, I thought, let them believe tonight is theirs. When dawn came, it didn't roar. It whispered. A pale slice of light crept across the floorboards, touching the packed bags lined neatly by the door. My son stirred, blinking up at me, his voice groggy. "Is it time?" I nodded. "Yes, quietly now." We slipped through the hallway, shoes in hand. The house smelled like perfume and burnt toast, the scent of people who believed control was breakfast. Claire's laughter floated faintly from her phone in the kitchen, the same hollow sound she used when mocking others online. Mom's voice echoed from upstairs, rehearsing judgment in advance of anyone hearing it. We stepped outside. The morning air was cold and still, carrying the scent of wet earth. For the first time, no one told us where to go. At the bus stop, my son held my hand tightly. His backpack looked too big on his shoulders, the fox toy's ear peeking out. I whispered, "We're free now." He didn't smile. He just breathed, a full, deep breath that sounded like beginning. We didn't take much, just essentials, important papers, a few clothes, enough money for a deposit. By afternoon, we had an apartment, small, second floor, with thin walls and peeling paint. But it was ours. When I turned the key and heard the click, it didn't sound like metal against metal. It sounded like permission. That first night, we slept on blankets spread across the floor. I listened to my son's breathing, steady and soft. The silence here wasn't heavy. It didn't judge. It didn't demand. It just existed. Days turned into weeks. My extra shifts stacked up. We learned the rhythm of independence. Laundry on Sundays, frozen dinners on weeknights, homework at the small kitchen table. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. And peace, I was learning, is its own luxury. Still, I couldn't shake the memories. My mother's voice. Speed comes from fear. Claire's laughter. My father's indifference. They replayed like a broken record in the background of my thoughts. But each time the echo came, it faded a little faster. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, a text arrived from an unknown sender. Claire lost her job. HR found out about her credentials. They're investigating her side business too. Thought you should know. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I hadn't expected it to happen so soon. I hadn't lied, hadn't fabricated anything. I'd just turned the light on, and the truth had done the rest. A week later, I overheard my manager gossiping at work. Did you hear about the Ellisons? Their house might go under. Mortgage renewal denied. The Golden family's falling apart. She didn't know she was talking about me. I kept my head down, scanning inventory, my pulse steady. That night, I tucked my son in early and sat by the window. Through the glass, the city lights blinked like quiet witnesses. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was distance, like watching a storm hit someone else's field. 3 weeks after we left, the storm reached my doorstep. It was a Thursday evening, just after sunset. I was washing dishes when my son called softly, "Mom, there's a car outside." I wiped my hands and walked to the window. There, parked across the street, sat my father's car. The headlights off, the engine humming low. My mother sat in the passenger seat, her face pale, eyes red. My father gripped the wheel, staring straight ahead. Claire wasn't with them. My phone vibrated again. Private number. I let it ring. We turned off the lights. My son watched through the curtains, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are they here to say sorry?" "No," I said. "They're here because they lost someone they thought they owned." He frowned. "Us?" I shook my head. "No, themselves." For a long time, the car didn't move. I could see my mother gesturing wildly, mouthing words I couldn't hear. My father finally stepped out and walked to our door. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, the kind he used when entering my childhood room without permission. I stood in the hallway, my hand on the doorknob, my pulse calm. Through the peephole, I saw their faces, familiar but smaller somehow, fragile. "Donetta," Mom's voice came, muffled. "We need to talk." Behind me, my son whispered, "Are you going to open it?" I took a step back. "No," I said. "We don't open the door for noise." He nodded. He understood. The knocks grew louder, then desperate, then silence. After a few minutes, I heard the slow crunch of gravel under tires. The car pulled away. The night exhaled. I sat by the window again after tucking my son into bed. The city hummed softly below us. Streetlights painted long gold streaks across the walls. My reflection looked back at me, older, sharper, free. I thought of all the times they'd said I was too soft, too emotional, too fragile. But they were wrong. It takes strength to stay kind in the face of cruelty. It takes courage to walk away without shouting. They used fear to build their world. And in the end, fear was what destroyed it. I looked at my son sleeping, his chest rising and falling beneath the thin blanket. Peace looked good on him. It looked good on both of us. The phone rang again. Same private number. I let it buzz until it stopped. Then I turned it face down. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full. I whispered to the night, to the walls that finally listened. They were right about one thing. I smiled faintly. Speed comes from fear. Then I closed my eyes, feeling the truth settle deep inside me. "Peace," I murmured, "makes you unstoppable." Outside, somewhere far away, thunder rolled, but this time it was just sound.